February 23, 1945, on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima, Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto sat crouched inside a concrete bunker, his fingers trembling as he put pen to paper. The words flowing from his hand would mean execution if his own officers discovered them. The Marines are not human. They do not die like ordinary soldiers. Everything we were told about American weakness was lies. Through a narrow firing slit, he had just witnessed something that shattered every principle drilled into him during training. 6 Marines had charged directly into the crossfire from his machine guns. 3 of them fell immediately. The other 3 kept coming. When his squad threw grenades, 1 Marine threw his body across the explosion to protect the men behind him, then picked up his rifle with gaping wounds and continued fighting until his body simply would not respond anymore. Within minutes, those surviving Marines took his position. 21,000 Japanese defenders honeycombed Iwo Jima with 18 kilometers of tunnels and defensive works. High Command had promised them soft American troops who would break under sustained pressure. What they discovered instead would overturn every calculation the Imperial Japanese Army had made about their opponents. The cost of this catastrophic misjudgment would be written not in strategic documents, but in the brutal mathematics of close-quarters fighting. 62,000 men would become casualties in just 36 days, with 26,000 wearing Marine uniforms. This pattern of miscalculation had begun years earlier, far from Iwo Jima. August 7, 1942, on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who had fought in China where Japanese forces seemed unstoppable, made an entry in his diary after the first week of combat. The Americans who came ashore are unlike any enemy we have encountered. They refuse to retreat when encircled. They will not surrender when their situation becomes hopeless. What troubles us most is they fight through the night as if darkness strengthens them rather than terrifies them. Guadalcanal represented Japan's opening defensive battle in the Pacific, and Tokyo believed the untested American forces would crack easily. The 1st Marine Division that stormed ashore numbered just over 16,000 men. Military intelligence had acknowledged Marines possessed training and discipline, certainly. Yet they remained Americans, products of a soft society that put individual well-being above collective duty. Within days, every assumption fractured catastrophically. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome led a reinforced rifle company through the jungle night of August 20th, tasked with retaking Henderson Field. His 200 men had decimated Chinese divisions twice their size in previous campaigns. They moved forward with textbook precision, convinced the Marines would panic once darkness fell. The Marines were positioned and waiting, fields of fire overlapping with devastating efficiency. Fukudome's company walked straight into slaughter. What happened next violated everything contained in Japanese military doctrine. Rather than holding ground defensively, the Marines launched immediate counterattacks into the darkness, wielding automatic weapons with surgical accuracy. Fukudome's diary, discovered after his death 3 days later, captured his shock. They attacked us in the darkness. We are the ones who attack in darkness. They moved through jungle we thought impassable. They killed silently, then simply vanished. By sunrise, only 90 men remained from his company. The Marines had taken 12 casualties. The same story repeated again and again across the island. Japanese forces, accustomed to enemies who broke under banzai charges, encountered Marines who held their ground until physically overrun, then fought with bayonets, knives, and bare fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, evacuated after 4 brutal months defending Guadalcanal, described his experience in a letter later intercepted by American intelligence. We were taught Americans value themselves above their comrades, that they would abandon each other to save their own skins. This is completely false. I watched a Marine machine gunner continue firing with both legs shattered until our infantry killed him at point-blank range. His assistant picked up the weapon immediately and kept fighting. We lost 40 men taking that single position. The training that produced such soldiers baffled Japanese military intelligence. Yamamoto himself learned about Marines in 1943 during intelligence briefings, before his own encounter on Iwo Jima. The briefing officer, a staff colonel who had interrogated captured Marines, looked visibly disturbed. American Marines undergo training that would constitute criminal abuse in a civilized nation. They are broken completely, mentally and physically, then remade into something barely recognizable as the civilians who started. They are taught that dying in combat brings honor, that surrender means shame, that fighting continues until they physically cannot hold a weapon. This sounds familiar, yes? They have adopted Bushido, but added something we did not anticipate. Unlimited American production. That combination proved unstoppable. Japanese soldiers, bound by Bushido and prepared for death, possessed weapons increasingly inferior to American arms. Marines endured training nearly as severe as anything Japanese soldiers faced, forging warriors equally willing to sacrifice themselves. Yet those Marines arrived with such overwhelming firepower that Japanese defensive positions became untenable. November 20th, 1943, on Tarawa. Rear Admiral Kaji Shibasaki commanded 4,500 defenders inside fortifications deemed impregnable. The 2nd Marine Division disproved him in 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, among only 17 Japanese survivors, described the scene to interrogators. The initial landing craft were destroyed before reaching the beach. We killed hundreds. More craft appeared. The second wave died on the sand. More came. The third assault wave reached our positions carrying flamethrowers. They did not stop until we were all dead, or they were. Nearly 6,400 Japanese fell in those 76 hours. The Marines who survived had proven they would seize any objective, regardless of the price demanded. Intelligence documents seized during the Saipan campaign revealed Japanese military assessments of Marine capability. They classified Marines as, quote, shock troops displaying fanatical commitment to assigned targets. Marines reject retreat orders and will counterattack even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties suffered by Marines do not reduce unit effectiveness until complete destruction, end quote. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, himself a Guadalcanal survivor, provided detailed analysis comparing American forces. Regular Army infantry follows sound conventional tactics. Marines function entirely differently. They advance relentlessly regardless of casualties. They accept casualty rates that would force any sensible commander to cease operations. This is unprecedented in our experience. The speed of Marine operations proved as lethal as their firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa commanded defenses on Palaliu, constructing his strategy around earlier campaigns where American forces paused after establishing beachheads. Marines never paused. They landed September 15th at 8:30 in the morning and had secured half the airfield by nightfall. Nakagawa's personal record expressed his disbelief. My entire defensive plan collapsed because it assumed rational enemy behavior. The Marines do not behave rationally. They advance with total commitment regardless of circumstances. This absolute commitment manifested in ways that appeared suicidal to Japanese observers, yet proved devastatingly effective. Sergeant Matsumoto, later captured on Bougainville, witnessed a Marine platoon assault a fortified hilltop. Open ground surrounded the position, swept by machine gun fire from 3 separate bunkers. Traditional Japanese doctrine would have called for extensive artillery preparation, followed by smoke-covered infantry assault. The Marine lieutenant studied the ground for perhaps 30 seconds, then ordered the charge with no preliminary bombardment. 7 men fell in the first 20 seconds. Survivors reached the first bunker and destroyed it with grenades and demolition equipment. 3 more fell attacking the second bunker. The remaining Marines took it. The final bunker fell to the last 5 men still standing. 12 casualties from 37 men to take a position they thought impregnable. 4 minutes from order to objective complete. This was not heroism in the traditional sense. This was calculated mathematics. Acceptable casualties deployed to achieve objectives faster than Japanese forces could react. The concept of acceptable casualties horrified Japanese officers, raised to value each soldier's life within the framework of victory. Marines computed casualties as the simple cost of winning and paid that cost without hesitation. This created psychological advantage beyond mere material power. Japanese commanders understood that Marines would accept 50% casualties to seize a target. Every decision became impossible. Defend lightly and lose the position. Defend adequately and weaken surrounding areas. abandon ground and concede terrain. Every path led toward defeat, with only the timeline uncertain. Major Yoshitaka Hori, senior staff officer surviving Iwo Jima, analyzed this situation during post-war interrogations. General Kuribayashi recognized we could not defeat the Marines, only delay them and extract the highest possible price. We succeeded in creating casualties. Over 20,000 Marines fell in 36 days. Any other military force would have been incapable of continuing offensive operations after such losses. The Marines received reinforcements and attacked without any reduction in intensity. We estimated 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for a minimum 1 week. They suffered 10,000 casualties in week 1 and never slowed their pace. This revealed the fundamental asymmetry. They could replace their losses faster than we could. They possessed 50 Marine divisions, either deployed across the Pacific or training in America. We had only the finite defenders on each island. Mathematics guaranteed our defeat. That mathematics extended beyond simple numbers. Marines landed with logistical capacity, enabling operations at intensities Japanese forces could never match. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, captured on Saipan, personally witnessed this disparity during a night patrol 3 days after American landing. We expected to find exhausted troops with depleted supplies, as Japanese units would have been after equivalent combat on a contested beachhead. Instead, we discovered Marines eating cooked food, receiving ammunition deliveries by truck, medical personnel treating wounded in tent hospitals, and rest stations where units rotated from the front line. Their ammunition dumps held more ordnance than my entire regiment possessed. They had mobile kitchens preparing meals. They had shower and laundry equipment. They were fighting the Pacific's most intense battle while living better than Japanese garrison troops. This revealed the truth no defense could overcome. They would never exhaust their food, ammunition, medicine, or replacement soldiers. We would. American logistics created attrition warfare, favoring Marines despite their higher initial casualties. Japanese defenders held fixed positions with limited supplies and zero reinforcements. Each casualty was permanent. Each ammunition round spent could not be replaced. Marines fought from an expanding beachhead, receiving daily ship and air resupply. Their casualties were evacuated and replaced. Their ammunition was endless. Every additional day of fighting strengthened the Americans while weakening Japanese defenders. This dynamic proved decisive on Peleliu, where Colonel Nakagawa's defense ran from September 15th through November 27th. The 1st Marine Division suffered such horrific casualties, it was withdrawn and replaced by Army units in October. A 2nd Marine Division remained until relieved by infantrymen. The battle that planners projected lasting 1 week continued for 11 weeks. Japanese defenders inflicted over 10,000 American casualties, yet Americans could absorb those losses and keep attacking. Japan could not defend every island with equivalent casualty rates. The arithmetic was unsustainable. Military leadership comprehended this unsustainability by mid-1944. Intelligence bulletins distributed to garrison commanders acknowledged Marines could not be stopped, only delayed. One document captured on Tinian provided instructions revealing complete abandonment of any victory hope. When opposing Marine assault, do not anticipate holding positions permanently. Your objective is delaying American advance enough to enable other strategic aims. Each day of defense matters. Each Marine killed or wounded matters. Understand that your position will eventually fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock your positions with maximum ammunition. Establish fallback defensive lines, except you will probably die defending them. Your sacrifice provides time for the Empire. Honor exists in this sacrifice, even without victory. That grim mathematics defined Japanese defensive strategy through 1945. Defenders no longer fought to win. They fought to make victory so expensive that Americans might accept negotiations rather than invade the home islands. Marines, through accepting casualties that would have stopped any other army, negated this calculation. They paid whatever price was demanded and continued advancing. No cost seemed too great. No position proved too strong. The offensive never halted. Private Ogawa, among Tarawa's few survivors, later described the psychological weight of facing such an enemy. After the first day, we understood we would lose. The Marines landed in overwhelming numbers. Their battleships destroyed our positions. Their aircraft bombed us constantly. Yet we believed we could make victory so painful they would reconsider future invasions. Then we watched them continue attacking despite staggering casualties. They walked through machine gun fire that killed dozens. More Marines arrived. We killed them too. More came. We fought 3 days with complete dedication. We inflicted thousands of casualties. We died almost completely. The Marines took Tarawa on schedule. They paid our price and kept advancing across the Pacific. That moment taught us the war was lost. An enemy willing to pay any price cannot be stopped by making victory expensive. That understanding spread throughout Japanese military ranks as survivors carried their experiences forward to the next battle. By the time Marines reached Iwo Jima in February 1945, every Japanese defender understood whom they faced. The most relentless enemy the Pacific had produced. They knew they would perish. They knew the Marines would claim the island. The only remaining variable was Marine casualty count. General Kuribayashi's defensive plan accepted this reality and structured strategy accordingly. His instructions to troops acknowledged what propaganda denied. We cannot win this battle. We will only make Americans bleed for every meter of ground. That is our mission. Accept death, inflict casualties, delay their advance. This is how we serve the empire in its darkest hour. And battle after battle proved this assessment correct. February 19, 1945. D-Day arrives on Iwo Jima, offering the most thorough test of Japanese understanding regarding marine fighting capabilities. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, perhaps Japan's finest defensive strategist in the Pacific theater, had devoted months to studying how Marines operated and designing countermeasures specifically built to stop them. His defensive preparations were nothing short of extraordinary. Yet before Iwo Jima could test Kuribayashi's strategy, Marine raiders had already demonstrated abilities that went well beyond ordinary effectiveness. These specialized units conducted operations deep behind enemy lines, creating far greater terror and disruption than their small size would suggest. Japanese commanders learned quickly that raiders moved through darkness with lethal precision. Colonel Kiyono Ichiki discovered this truth in the bloodiest possible way on Guadalcanal in August 1942. His contingent of 900 soldiers had successfully defeated Chinese forces using aggressive nocturnal assaults. Japanese military thinking held that Americans hated fighting at night. Ichiki organized what should have been a textbook night attack against Marine positions along the Tanaru River. Raiders from the 1st Marine Raider Battalion waited in carefully prepared defensive spots. When Ichiki's soldiers waded into the river at 01:30 hours on August 21st, the raiders unleashed fire from automatic weapons at devastating close range, with artillery that had been registered on that exact location. 20 minutes of combat determined the outcome. More than 700 Japanese soldiers fell dead. Marine losses came to 35. The raider units were ultimately disbanded and absorbed into regular Marine divisions during 1944. Yet their innovative methods spread throughout the entire Corps. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima, standard infantry platoons were using techniques the raiders had perfected. Patrols operated through the night, continuously testing defenses. Small squads made their own tactical choices. Radio equipment enabled coordination never before achieved. What emerged was an opponent fighting every single hour with a ferocity Japanese forces simply could not sustain. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who experienced combat across 3 separate islands before his eventual capture on Okinawa, summed up what this relentless pressure felt like. The Marines never stopped fighting. They attacked during daylight with overwhelming force. At night, small groups infiltrated deeper into our positions. Artillery shells fell constantly, preventing any meaningful rest. Bombing runs continued during every daylight hour. From the moment they landed until the moment they defeated us, the pressure never ceased. Japanese soldiers had always controlled the darkness, regrouping and recovering after daylight battles. Against the Marines, no such opportunity existed. No time felt safe. There was simply unending combat until death or capture arrived. This systematic application of firepower without mercy represented something altogether different. What fascinated and deeply disturbed Japanese military analysts was how thoroughly the Marines weaponized industrial capacity. While Japanese forces depended on spiritual commitment and individual sacrifice to compensate for material shortages, Marines deployed maximum force methodically against every obstacle. When a fortified position blocked their advance, they did not depend on bravery or ingenious tactics. They identified the target, directed artillery to fire hundreds of shells destroying it, pushed forward tanks equipped with flamethrowers to incinerate survivors, then sent infantry to claim the position. If fighting continued, naval gunfire from destroyers or battleships would annihilate the entire area. This calculated demolition was terrifying in how efficiently it worked. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, serving as an artillery observer on Saipan, witnessed this coordinated assault system during the June 1944 invasion. His personal records documented what he saw in precise detail. Warships provided covering fire that lasted 3 continuous hours before the first landing craft reached shore. Bombers attacked their positions for 2 hours before the Marines disembarked. Once ashore, every Marine movement received support from tanks, artillery, naval guns, and aircraft overhead. They progressed methodically and deliberately, eliminating everything blocking their path. When Japanese defenders held at prepared positions, battleships fired with such force that entire hills vanished from the landscape. They did not attempt to break through via courage or tactical innovation. They employed overwhelming force to destroy each position, then moved forward. This was not warfare as we comprehended it. This was industrial annihilation, carried out systematically until all resistance became impossible. Japanese soldiers fought equipped with rifles and light machine guns. Their opponents fought with the complete industrial output of an entire nation behind them. Endo's account captured what numerous Japanese soldiers grasped far too late. The Pacific War was not ultimately a measure of warrior spirit or tactical brilliance. It was fundamentally a competition between Imperial Japan's constrained manufacturing capacity and America's tremendous productive capability. Marines represented the sharp tip of that production advantage, fighters trained to capitalize on American superiority while sustaining casualty rates that benefited from larger populations and continuous replacement streams. Against opponents like this, Japanese determination and battlefield skill amounted to nothing. The conclusion had been inevitable from the very beginning. Only the time frame and the price remained uncertain. Kuribayashi forbade the Banzai charges that had squandered Japanese lives in earlier campaigns. He constructed a defense system in depth that funneled Marines into kill zones protected by multiple bunker positions. Artillery was positioned to rain devastating fire onto the landing beaches. 11 miles of connected tunnels linked 1,500 separate cave positions. Each approach had been calculated for mortar and artillery fire. The beaches themselves were a death zone. 3 Marine divisions, numbering 70,000 soldiers, came ashore on Iwo Jima on February 19th. Kuribayashi's defense system worked precisely as he had envisioned. Naval bombardment inflicted minimal damage on the fortifications. Marines landed in organized formations and immediately suffered enormous casualties. Within moments, the dark volcanic sand became littered with dead and wounded. Japanese artillery observers directed perfectly timed fire. The assault seemed destined to fail. Then something transpired that Kuribayashi should have anticipated but did not. The Marines refused to pull back. They advanced directly into the artillery barrage. They discovered the gaps between Japanese positions and drove through them. When bunkers blocked their path, engineer teams crawled forward under intense fire to demolish them. When those men died, other Marines moved into their places. The assault continued without pause. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto observed from his bunker as Marines charged the position to his right. His records conveyed the bewilderment Japanese defenders experienced. A flamethrower operator approached the bunker. We eliminated him. The second Marine seized the weapon and advanced. We killed him too. A third Marine took the flamethrower. We wounded him severely. He continued firing until the weapon ran dry. He then hurled grenades through the firing openings until we killed him. Meanwhile, demolition specialists reached the bunker entrance. The position fell. This repeated 30 times within that single hour. What defense could overcome men who simply would not stop? The terrible mathematics of Iwo Jima answered that question. Japanese defenders discovered there was no such defense. 70,000 Marines landed on the island. 26,000 became casualties, with nearly 7,000 killed. Every single one of the 21,000 Japanese defenders perished, with the exception of 1,016 taken prisoner, mostly those rendered unconscious or too severely wounded to resist. The Marines sustained an almost incomprehensible price in blood, yet they achieved every objective. Kuribayashi himself, who survived into late March 1945, composed a final assessment in a communication delivered to Tokyo before his position collapsed. The Marines represent the most formidable fighting force I have ever confronted. They possess multiple characteristics, creating exceptional danger. Their preparation produces soldiers prepared to absorb casualties that would destroy other armies. Their firepower exceeds ours by 5 to 1 in artillery and 10 to 1 in air support. Their lower-ranking leaders make tactical decisions at squad level that our officers make at company level, enabling them to respond to opportunities far faster than we can. Fourth, and most critically, they never stop their assault. No defensive system can withstand this combination indefinitely. This realization terrified Japanese soldiers across the Pacific. Defeat in battle was something they could accept. Being outgunned or outmaneuvered made sense. What shattered them was encountering an enemy that simply continued attacking regardless of the mounting cost in their own lives. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who saw action on 3 islands before his capture on Okinawa, explained during a post-war discussion, "You must grasp the distinction between Marines and other American soldiers. Army units would assault, incur losses, and fall back to reorganize. That is sound military reasoning. Marines would assault, incur losses, and continue over the corpses of their fallen comrades. That is not military doctrine. That is something else entirely." The characteristic that made Marines so dangerous was deliberately cultivated through training that reduced recruits to nothing, then reconstructed them into warriors whose sense of identity was absolutely tied to the Corps itself. Captured documents from Saipan held interrogation notes from a Marine prisoner who described this transformation to puzzled Japanese intelligence officers. Boot camp spans 8 weeks. The initial 4 weeks employ drilling and psychological assault designed to strip away civilian identity. Recruits are told repeatedly they are worthless, that they will never become Marines, that they should leave and join the army instead. Both psychological and physical abuse follows. You are strained past what feels possible, then pushed even further beyond that limit. Recruits who quit face public humiliation. Survivors absorb a fundamental lesson that surrender is never acceptable. Japanese officers found this familiar, but also noted that something followed which had no counterpart in their own military training. During the second 4 weeks, instructors construct you into a Marine. You discover that you belong to something transcending individual existence, that every Marine throughout history is your brother. This created something without parallel. Marines fought not for victory, but because failure would betray every Marine who had ever lived. This psychological force propelled fighters into assaults that simple logic suggested they could not survive. Japanese defenders encountered this concentrated mentality in its starkest form during the Banzai charges that should have shattered Marine defenses, but resulted in catastrophic failure. Between October 24th and 25th, 1944, on Saipan, Colonel Takuya Takashina commanded roughly 3,000 Japanese soldiers in a final Banzai assault directed at Marine positions. Japanese military doctrine maintained that such an assault, executed with complete commitment, would break any defense through overwhelming aggression and fear of being overrun by massive numbers. The 27th Infantry Division Marines occupying the assault's path were largely sleeping when the charge began at 0300 hours. Japanese forces surged into Marine lines, screaming with fixed bayonets, overrunning forward defensive lines through sheer numbers. Standard military theory would prescribe a fighting withdrawal for regrouping. Instead, the Marines immediately launched counterattacks, with officers and sergeants organizing desperate defensive stands at crucial locations. Every available weapon entered the fight, from artillery firing at point-blank range to trench blades used in close-quarters combat. The engagement continued for 4 continuous hours. When sunlight appeared, Japanese corpses covered ground 500 meters deep. American losses totaled 90 killed and 247 wounded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers died. Private First Class Tadashi Yoshida sustained severe wounds but survived. His interrogation report, filed 3 days afterward, captured the disbelief Japanese soldiers experienced. We had been told Americans feared hand-to-hand fighting, that they depended on distant firepower because they were actually cowards. We charged, expecting them to collapse. They fought us with bayonets and blades and defeated us. I personally witnessed a Marine sergeant kill 7 soldiers using just a bayonet and his pistol before he was killed himself. This is not cowardice. We were misinformed. Those lies extended throughout every element of Marine capability. Years of Japanese propaganda had portrayed Americans as undisciplined, selfish people unable to tolerate hardship. Marines sleeping in waterlogged foxholes, consuming cold food for weeks, enduring 100-degree temperatures with nearly 80% humidity, contradicted this portrayal directly. Japanese soldiers, supposedly conditioned for deprivation, watched Marines adapt successfully to circumstances that pushed Japanese physical limits far beyond breaking points. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, who endured Guadalcanal before reassignment to Bougainville, where he was captured in February 1944, described the stark differences in living conditions. By September 1942, we subsisted on minimal rations, rice served twice daily at best. We foraged whatever the jungle provided that was remotely edible. The Marines consumed 3 substantial meals every single day, frequently more. Air and sea resupply ensured continuous abundance. Fresh water remained constantly available. Medical supplies and ammunition appeared without limitation. We understood then that we faced an opponent whose resources would never diminish. That realization fractured our spirits. The material advantage Marines possessed was absolutely overwhelming. Against fortified bunkers, Marines summoned artillery, delivering hundreds of shells within moments. Advanced Sherman tanks equipped with flamethrowers and employed naval gunfire capable of erasing hills. When that still failed, demolition teams would haul hundreds of kilograms of explosives forward to destroy positions directly. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome, before his death on Guadalcanal, wrote the war's most thorough examination of Marine combined arms capability. The Marines do not operate as individual fighters. They function as components within a unified mechanism. Riflemen locate our position. Machine gunners suppress our fire. Mortars create smoke obscuring our observation. Artillery dismantles our fortifications. Tanks advance alongside infantry. Aircraft bombard positions that artillery cannot reach. This coordination happens within moments of first contact, orchestrated by junior officers communicating via radios we do not possess. We cannot respond because our coordination simply moves too slowly. By the moment our commander grasps the situation and transmits orders, the Marines have exploited our weakness and shifted. This execution speed existed because Marines gave authority to the most junior possible ranks. Sergeants made decisions that Japanese protocol assigned to captains. Corporals directed assaults requiring lieutenant authorization. In the Imperial Japanese Army, this produced an opponent adapting faster than Japanese commanders could process information. When a bunker halted a Marine advance, a sergeant independently adjusted the attack's direction and requested supporting fire without awaiting higher authorization. Japanese defenders suddenly faced enemies materializing from unexpected directions because Marines had identified and exploited weaknesses before commanders even recognized those vulnerabilities existed. The most dreaded weapon in the Marine arsenal wasn't a rifle or artillery piece. It was fire. The flamethrower transformed combat into something Japanese soldiers had never imagined they would face. They had been raised to believe death in battle could be honorable, glorious even, but nothing in their training prepared them for this. Corporal Hideo Takahashi was captured on Okinawa with burns covering nearly half his body. He spoke about what that moment meant, about what it did to the mind. We believed death by sword or bullet or shrapnel could be noble, he explained. These were warriors' deaths, the kind we trained for from childhood. But fire. Fire was different. You see the flames coming toward your position. You smell the flesh of your comrades burning. The screaming never stops. There is no honor in that kind of dying. It was industrial killing, nothing more. This was what the Marines understood that Japanese commanders had completely missed. War had changed. Modern combat had no room for notions of glory. It was purely about eliminating the enemy as effectively as possible, using whatever tools got the job done best. This truth arrived far too late for the defenders scattered across the Pacific. By 1944, every Japanese soldier knew one brutal fact: facing American Marines meant facing something unprecedented. They possessed training, equipment, and tactical doctrine unlike anything Japan had encountered. Intelligence documents captured and circulated among garrison commanders revealed a mixture of grim respect and almost superstitious dread. One report seized on Tinian in July 1944 contained detailed instructions for defending against Marine attacks. What made it remarkable was what it openly acknowledged, things that contradicted years of official Japanese propaganda. Marines were larger and physically stronger than average Japanese soldiers, the result of better nutrition their entire lives. They had access to more ammunition, superior weapons, and more dependable equipment than Imperial Army troops received. Marine riflemen trained to hit targets at distances where Japanese soldiers couldn't even aim accurately. The Americans provided them with air support and naval gunfire that Japan possessed no answer to. But the most critical point cut deepest. Marines were trained to view surrender as unacceptable. They would fight to death or victory. There existed no third option. The tactical guidance that followed was brutally frank about what this meant. Don't expect Marines to pull back. Don't assume heavy losses will break their morale. Don't believe that superior numbers help when their firepower renders numerical advantage meaningless. Avoid banzai charges unless there was literally no alternative, because Marines would shred attacking troops with automatic weapons and artillery barrages. Don't assume darkness gave any advantage, since Marines fought effectively at night. The only viable approach was preparing fortified positions with overlapping fields of fire and planned retreat routes, while accepting that these positions would eventually fall. The goal wasn't stopping the Marines, but extracting maximum casualties before the position got overrun. This doctrine acknowledged harsh reality, but offered no path to actual victory. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi grasped this completely as he prepared Iwo Jima's defenses in early 1945. He wrote to his wife in January, just 1 month before the invasion would come. The assignment was straightforward: defend Iwo Jima against American Marines. But mathematics allowed only one conclusion: 70,000 Marine troops would land with complete command of the sea and complete control of the air. They would bring ammunition and supplies in unlimited quantities. They would continue attacking until Iwo Jima was theirs. "My job is not victory," he wrote. "Victory is impossible. My mission is making them pay such a terrible price that American leadership reconsiders invading our home islands. Every day I hold them here. The Empire gains time to rebuild and prepare. Every Marine that dies is one fewer enemy for our final battle." Kuribayashi's strategy reflected how far Japanese defensive thinking had evolved, from confident offensive operations to desperate attempts at attrition. The Marines landing on February 19th encountered defenses specifically designed not to stop them, but to drain their strength in ways that might sap American resolve. Every bunker required direct assault. Every cave opening had multiple firing positions covering it. Every meter of terrain demanded lives to capture. But the strategy miscalculated Marine psychology. High casualties didn't break their morale. It strengthened it. Each fallen Marine demanded vengeance. Every brutal day of combat hardened survivors' commitment to finish the job. The worse things became, the harder they fought. This made no sense to Japanese military thought, which believed that even the most fanatical soldiers eventually reached a breaking point. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto made it until March 10th before dying in his bunker. The night before the end, he wrote his final entry. "Tomorrow Marines will reach this position. We've killed hundreds in the past weeks. More keep arriving. They never weaken. They never slow. They never quit. I believed our spirit was superior to American materialism. I was wrong. Marines possess spirit equal to ours, combined with weapons and resources we cannot match. They are what we claimed to be. We are what we claimed they were. This is what we understand as we die. The bunker was destroyed the next morning by Marine demolition teams following a 6-hour assault that killed all 11 defenders and wounded 3 Marines. The position delayed the Marine advance by exactly 40 minutes before other units bypassed it and continued forward. This scene played out countless times across the island. Japanese defenders showed desperate courage, inflicted terrible casualties, and achieved nothing except their own deaths. When the campaign ended on March 26th, the numbers told the story of what happened when Marines faced Japan's best defensive preparations. 21,000 Japanese died. Only 1,016 surrendered, most of them unconscious or physically unable to resist anymore. The Marines paid for it with 26,000 casualties from 70,000 men committed. Nearly 40%. Any other military organization would have needed months to recover. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions were operational again within 6 weeks. This capacity to absorb devastating losses and remain combat effective became what terrified Japanese defenders most. Corporal Kenji Matsumoto, imprisoned in Hawaii after capture, described it in a 1946 interview. The hardest part was knowing they would never stop. You could kill half a Marine unit and the other half kept attacking. Their officers fell, sergeants took command. You could fight them until exhaustion and they attacked again the next day. There was no winning. You could only kill them until they killed you. This wasn't war, this was mutual annihilation. And they had more men than we did. The sheer capacity of American industry to produce replacement Marines shocked Japanese military planners. Intelligence reports from late 1944 noted that Marine divisions suffered 75% casualties at Peleliu in September 1944, then returned to full strength within 3 months. Those replacements arrived on Iwo Jima in February and fought with the same skill as the veterans they replaced. This ability to regenerate shattered units had no equivalent in Japanese capability. The Imperial Army lacked any comparable training system, lacked the replacement pipeline needed to maintain unit effectiveness while sustaining catastrophic losses. American efficiency extended through every Marine operation. Wounded Marines received medical attention within minutes of being hit. Air and sea evacuation moved wounded men from combat zones to hospital ships in hours, where blood plasma, antibiotics, and surgical expertise saved lives at rates unprecedented in military history. Japanese wounded often died from lack of medical supplies, infected wounds, injuries that American medicine routinely treated. Captured Japanese soldiers watched in amazement as Marines who should have died from wounds that would have killed Japanese soldiers instead recovered and fought again. The final blow came after surrender in August 1945. Marines occupied the Japanese home islands, expecting fierce resistance from a population taught to die rather than surrender. Instead, they found exhausted people, relieved the war had ended. Private First Class Takeshi Yoshida returned home in 1946 after recovering from wounds received on Saipan. Everything we were told was lies, he said. Marines didn't torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers. The Americans weren't barbarians. We were the barbarians. This knowledge destroyed what remained of faith in the empire. Thousands of former soldiers reached identical conclusions. Post-war interrogation reports revealed consistent themes: respect for Marine combat abilities, bitterness toward Japanese leadership that had lied about American capabilities, recognition that the war had been hopeless from the beginning because Japan lacked American industrial capacity and troops with Marine fighting quality. General Kuribayashi's final message from Iwo Jima provided the most comprehensive assessment. Transmitted by desperate radio on March 21st, 5 days before the island fell, he wrote, "I have fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have encountered. Their training exceeds ours, their equipment overwhelms ours, their courage equals ours, and their numbers are endless. Japan cannot defeat such an enemy." We can only die fighting them and hope our sacrifice provides time for peace negotiations that save something of our nation. To officers preparing to defend the home islands, know this. The Marines will come. You cannot stop them, you can only make them pay in blood for every meter. Perhaps if the price becomes high enough, they will negotiate instead of destroying everything. That is our only hope. That hope died with the atomic bombs in August. But Kuribayashi's assessment of Marines proved accurate. They became the spear tip that shattered Japanese defensive lines across the Pacific. They paid terrible prices, suffering casualty rates that would have destroyed other organizations. But they never broke, never retreated, never surrendered any captured position. They were exactly what Japanese propaganda claimed the Imperial Army was: invincible warriors who would fight to death before accepting defeat. The profound irony was that Marines achieved this through systematic training and overwhelming material support, not through mystical warrior spirit or racial superiority. They demonstrated that modern warfare required both courage and industrial capacity, both training and technology, both individual sacrifice and national resources. Japan possessed courage and training. America possessed everything. Marines embodied that totality in ways no other American unit matched. Japanese veterans recognized this distinction. Corporal Hideyoto Takahashi, interviewed in 1975 as an elderly man, summarized what his generation learned. We were taught that spirit defeats material, that our willingness to die made us invincible. Marines taught us that spirit plus material defeats spirit alone. They were willing to die as we were, but they had Sherman tanks and naval gunfire and unlimited ammunition and air superiority and medical care and food and all of America's resources behind them. We had rifles and courage and promises of victory. That wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The statistics confirmed this conclusion. Marines fought in every major Pacific campaign, from Guadalcanal in August 1942 to Okinawa in June 1945. They suffered 86,000 casualties, including 19,500 killed. Yet they never failed to take an objective, never abandoned a captured position, never gave Japanese forces hope that superior tactics or fighting spirit could defeat them. The price was terrible. The results were absolute. Post-war Japanese military analysts studying Marine operations reached unanimous conclusions. Marines represented the ultimate expression of American military power, combining warrior ethos matching Japanese Bushido with industrial resources matching American production capacity. They trained soldiers willing to die for victory while supplying them with weapons and support that made victory possible. This combination was unbeatable. The lessons came too late for the 21,000 Japanese soldiers facing Marines on Iwo Jima, the 30,000 fighting them on Okinawa, the hundreds of thousands preparing to fight them on the home islands before surrender ended everything. Those men knew only that Marines were the enemy they feared most, the enemy officers couldn't stop, the enemy that kept coming, regardless of losses, until every Japanese defender was gone. Private First Class Yamamoto's final diary entry, written hours before dying in his bunker, captured this understanding. The Marines will win. Not because they're braver, not because they want victory more. They'll win because their nation gives them everything required for victory, and they'll use those resources without mercy until we're all dead. This is the truth our leaders should have told us. We are samurai fighting swords against men with machine guns who also possess samurai spirit. There was never any hope. Only death. The bunker fell the next day. Marines found his diary, forwarded it to intelligence officers who translated it and filed it among thousands of similar documents. The words captured a truth Japanese soldiers across the Pacific learned through bitter experience. Fighting Marines was different from fighting other American forces, different from fighting British or Chinese or any other enemy. It meant facing an opponent combining everything Japan claimed to possess with everything Japan lacked. That combination made Marines the most feared enemy Japanese soldiers encountered. The statistics tell part of it. The battles tell more. The words of surviving Japanese soldiers reveal the complete picture. They faced men who wouldn't stop, wouldn't surrender, would die before accepting defeat, and possessed weapons and support, making that determination devastating. Against such an enemy, courage wasn't enough, training wasn't enough, determination wasn't enough. Nothing sufficed except surrender or death. The Japanese military chose death. Marines delivered it with systematic precision. That explained why Japanese soldiers feared Marine combat more than any other unit. Marines said they'd take the objective, and they took it. They said they'd accept any cost, and they paid it. They never stopped. Japanese defenders discovered courage meant nothing against an enemy matching their determination while exceeding their firepower by impossible margins. That lesson, written in blood from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, became what Japanese veterans acknowledged after propaganda faded. Marines were everything Japan claimed its soldiers were, backed by everything Japan could never provide. Against such an enemy, the war was lost before it began. Marines proved it conclusively, one island at a time, at costs measured in thousands of lives on both sides.